Edouard Salsas is an attorney and member of both the Paris and the Madrid bars. He joins me now on the set to talk a bit more about this. Edouard, thanks so much for coming in to see us. The trial that's being held today, starting today, is going to go on for a few months, is being held at the highest court in Spain. Can that decision ultimately be appealed?
It cannot. The Supreme Court of Spain will be the first and the last court to examine the merits of this case. Then there are several appeals on procedural matters, both in Spain before the Constitutional Tribunal and before international courts, in the European Court of Justice, etc., etc. But the merits of this case will be examined for the first and last time before the Supreme Court of Spain.
Now, several of the separatist leaders have been held in jail for months now. Some among them have called themselves political prisoners. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it just depends on your point of view, of course. But the accusation against these 12 people is rebellion. To have a rebellion, you need to have violence. And the violence condition is one of the most difficult proofs that will need to prove the public prosecutor, because during the days before this 1st of October referendum, there was no violence in Barcelona, and we were all saying how surprised we were that there were no violent acts. And suddenly now, after the referendum, and once the Spanish state failed to prevent this referendum from happening, then the public prosecutor started this narrative of violent acts. But with no violent acts, and there were no violent acts, and there are no images of those violent acts, there are no public accusations before the referendum of these violent acts. With no violence, there's no rebellion. With no rebellion, there's no accusation whatsoever that could be sustainable before the Supreme Court.
Many of the separatists and the separatist backers are trying to attack the credibility of the Supreme Court, saying it's just a puppet for the Spanish government. What does the court need to do to prove it's impartial, and can it really be impartial in this kind of case?
Well, the big question is, how did we come to this situation? How did we manage, us Spanish, people of law, to be in a situation where the Supreme Court is in question for its impartiality? And this is a history of years and years and years of the political parties in Spain intervening in the functioning of the justice, and all these judges have been appointed by political parties. It's very surprising that in Spain and in no other countries in Europe, the press can tell you if a judge is right-wing or left-wing. And beforehand, they can tell you the outcome of a case. This is absolutely, it's surprising, and it has no precedent in other European democracies. So, in fact, the political parties in Spain have been participating in the nomination of all these judges, which comes to a situation now where there is no confidence from the general public on its institutions, on the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the highest ranked tribunal in Spain.
So given what you're saying, is it a given then that the Supreme Court will rule against these separatists?
I think that we should have never come to this situation. This is a political problem, a political issue. It would have never come to a judge to rule on this, because it's not a legal matter. There is no violence. The actions of these separatists cannot be provided in the criminal code, and this was a political issue, and it should have been resolved by political means, by this dialogue that the Spanish government does not want to have, and the separatists do want to have. But in any case, it's very difficult that, given the situation now of the public opinion in Spain, that this tribunal, which is highly politicized, can give an acquittance decision.
But it's interesting because the minority government that's now in control in Spain needs Catalonia's pro-independence parties to get its budget passed. There's an important vote that's coming down tomorrow. But the pro-independence parties are asking for something called self-determination, which is forbidden by the Constitution. How will this deadlock get resolved?
Well, it's actually not forbidden by the Constitution.
Okay.
So this is the first slight correction that I would make. But in any case, it is true. Pedro Sánchez needs the votes of the Catalans to approve the budget. He needs the votes of the Catalans for his government to be stable. And on the other side, we have the right-wing parties who lost the government last year and who do not need the independentists, but they are not stable anymore. So in a way, the Catalan independentists are the key to rule Spain, and the problem is that there's nobody willing to engage this dialogue and to frankly and plainly and candidly speak about everything and speak about self-determination, speak about independence, which is what the Catalans have been asking for years and years. And it's somehow surprising that this has not happened in Spain, because in the UK, they had the same situation. Scotland, a part of Scotland wanted to split from the UK. They organized a vote. They both campaigned in the referendum. Finally, the separatists lost, and everybody went home, and everybody's happy. I mean, or at least everybody is happy with the result because it was a democratic result. It's in a way surprising that in Spain, nobody from the unionist camp has been able or has been willing to engage a candid dialogue on this situation and to resolve this situation politically. In any case, this is a case that would have never had to be judged before a tribunal. This is not a legal problem. It does not have any legal grounds. That's why I was saying from the very beginning that the public prosecutor will have a very difficult task to prove this violence, because it did not happen. It did not happen. So they cannot prove something that it did not happen, and nobody saw that. So in a way, it's not a legal problem. It's a political problem, and politicians should do their job and to engage a candid dialogue on self-determination.
Edward Salsas, it's passionate stuff. Thank you so much for coming in to speak to us about that very thorny issue of eventual Catalonian independence. Thank you so much, Edward Salsas, an attorney and member of the Paris and Madrid bars.